significant churchyards and alleyways. It also provides unique and valuable places, something that needs protecting but also promoting. The Barbican forms part of the future cultural hub, but also presents its own wayfinding and movement issues. In 1963, high walks were originally meant to be part of a larger high walk network. Only a handful of these were implemented, leaving the Barbican isolated at a high level to the rest of the city.
Why was that?
What do you mean?
Why did you think?
I think because it became out of fashion. As I've outlined, the city has a unique set of challenges: environment, health and well-being, road safety, security and placemaking. All of these fall under our major theme for the hackathon, movement conflict. This brings me to our hackathon problem statement. In a nutshell, the city is looking to improve the flow of people, goods and services in the Eastern Cluster to reduce the negative impact of population density. We're looking for startups and SMEs to think creatively, to come up with tech solutions for some of these problems. The winning prize is the chance to work with the City of London. The city is committed to working with the winners to look at how these ideas could be implemented in practice. They're also open to working with the runner-up to promote their idea as part of the Smarter Cities programme at the City Centre. The format of the hackathon will be a drinks reception on Friday the 19th of May. On Saturday morning, the hackathon will start with a data dump and discussions around the themes. On Sunday, the winner and runner-up will be announced at 6 p.m. If you'd like any more information or would like to be shortlisted for an invitation, then please email the City Centre. We hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stacey, and I think that's such an interesting opportunity. So absolutely, email, as Stacey said. We are also going to be promoting City of London Hackathon as part of this programme, and we will send out invitations to that as well, not only in the UK, but also Copenhagen and the Nordics, to get as many people involved in trying to build these solutions as possible. Right? So very, very exciting. In the same vein around competitions, what we're also going to be kicking off today is the Smarter Cities Now Solution Challenge. And basically what the Smarter Cities Now Solution Challenge is all about is if you're a startup or a SME working on a smart city solution within any of the 8 sustainability themes that we're going to continue to talk about them, so I'll make sure when you go home tomorrow you'll know exactly what the 8 sustainability themes are if you have forgotten already. If you're a startup or a SME working within any of those areas, we invite you to submit your solution, either a finished one, about to start one, or work in progress, to the competition. And actually, you heard from Jamie earlier on regarding the Good Hotel, and I did say he was going to engage with the programme in a super exciting way, and actually that super exciting way is that one of the prizes of the Smarter Solution Challenge is a fellowship at the Good Hotel, which involves a free cabin to use as a studio and also access to the open sort of communal space. Now, I did say earlier, you won't believe it until you see it, but it is such a cool environment. So that's actually one of 2 prizes of the Smart City Solution Challenge, and the other prize, you're going to hear from Torben from Blocks Up in Copenhagen in a short while, and one of the other prizes is a place in the shortlist for the Blocks Up Accelerator Programme in Copenhagen. So very, very exciting indeed. Again, we're going to be promoting the Smarter Solution Challenge out to the startup and sort of SME communities. You know, in London, everybody's in the startup guide, and in Copenhagen and in the rest of the Nordics as well, to get as many people to join the competition as possible. Now, we're well aware that most of you guys in this room are probably not working on these kinds of solutions. What we'd really like you to do is to help us spread the message about the Smarter City Solution Challenge and the City of London Hackathon. Yeah, so please help us, and I think we are so excited that the Good Hotel and Blocks Up have offered prices for the competition. So I hope you think that is the first 2 steps in our big sort of framework and collaboration that should hopefully be very very exciting way of bringing the two sides together. So I think that's it for the competition element of the afternoon. So with that, we're going to be moving into the rest of the speakers, and now we're moving to the element I talked about this morning, which is all about people and communities, right? So without people and communities, there is no smart city, right? A smart city is only as smart as what it does for the people and communities who live in those smart cities. So, so the first speaker in this theme is Matthew Lloyd from Matthew Lloyd Architects. So I'd like to invite Matthew to. So I'd like Matthew to come up on stage and share your perspective with us, please, Matthew. Very warm welcome to you.
Hello everybody. Just to put me in the picture, so I'm a London architect working on a mixture of housing, mostly housing, some other more specific community type of schools, churches, community type of buildings. But our housing very much is, nowadays you probably know, London housing is about tenure in a city that's exploding with development at the moment. In spite of Brexit, as you see outside, there are cranes everywhere and apartment buildings rising in every corner. So I wanted to just explore the importance, because I seem to have the kind of particularly community-spirited kind of 10-minute slot from well, that's what I perceive, or at least in a relatively old-fashioned sense. There's an expression called pepper potting in housing, and I've never really known what it meant, although I've heard it for literally years. I know that it means mixed tenure, but I didn't quite understand why pepper potting. And actually the definition is, it seems to me, to sprinkle, as it were, pepper over a city, which is to sprinkle many things, it seems, in one place, rather than monocultural type of development. So my simple message to this city, to you, to anyone who's interested, but particularly London-centred, because I'm a very London-centred architect, is that whatever we do in development, we should mix it up. There's no doubt that if you've seen this city change in the last, I mean, the radical change in 20 years is breathtaking, really. And we are getting in the city to be a much better place, much more mixed in community and much more progressive, much more, if you like, European, possibly more Nordic in the way we're beginning to look. And 20 years ago it wasn't like that. It was frankly a dowdy city with vast differences in wealth, but at the same time no progressive development. Which did that go? And my perception is that as we're moving forward into this new Super London, that our mixed communities are thriving and beginning to get better and better. We are not a city, at least I don't think we're a country known for ghettos. Although to those in the know, this city is extremely divided. It's very divided from east to west, and it's very divided from the centre, particularly going east, mostly where I work. There are huge bubbles of wealth, and then particularly in the east, but really on all the edges, there's far too much, frankly, poverty and rundownness. And what's really helping us is that wealth is now spreading through the city, and we are seeing, through physical architectural planning development, significant change, not brought about per se by public money. People are happier. I'm sorry to put these buzz points up. People are simply happier, it seems to me, when we're in a mixed place. They're happier when there are small businesses. They're happier with diversity. They're happier with, in a sense, sprinkling the pepper over the city. Interesting to come here to Greenwich, which has changed in the last 10 years completely and utterly. And I'm looking and wondering how mixed up it is, and how where is the lack of commerce, in a sense? It's a thing that, it's a thing I think the government can do, and I've written planning there, because I can't tell the government to do anything else, but in planning terms, the planning process, which is good here, must be absolutely rigorous, must be absolutely forthright about mixing economic people, diverse economic peoples, and mostly you can do that through housing. Because the nice thing about being an environmentalist or someone involved in planning or architecture is whereas we cannot change the world, which naturally, as we all know, coalesces money into separate places and then leaves other people behind. But in planning terms, we can make a difference through particularly housing policy. And it's getting better, this city. This is a photograph of a little place near where I live. It's somewhere in North London, a very historic place, but until 10 years ago really very poor and not very diverse. And I'm seeing now in my city, and it's the old coffee shop thing that we all talk about. Coffee shops are arriving, little businesses are arriving, they're thriving. They're not pret-a-manger's, particularly, although we were saying earlier pret-a-manger's are pretty ubiquitous nowadays. But these little London village places are wonderful, and they're set to be wonderful across the whole city. But then there are huge contrasts. Housing schemes that, albeit utterly beautiful in richer areas, I mean, architecturally just ravishing, but they're simply denying ordinary incomed people access to them through the lack of an affordable mix, or affordable housing mix. And you haven't got to go far to see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of, or if not thousands of these types of blocks still left in this city. We are working as a community of architects, particularly again in housing, to begin to take away this kind of housing provision, which was built in a wrecked country, post-war of course. I'm just going to dip in here and say that you know about the right to buy for our council homes now, since the 80s. You have been able to buy your council house, and this is, in some quarters of the community, been hugely derided. Actually, I'm now beginning to think that right to buy was or is an excellent thing, because just as I'm advocating mixing up cities, it's fantastically important. And in a fiscal environment where there really isn't very much public money, we've got to have other ways of taking this kind of building, which I really don't think has much going for it, unless there's a mixture of people living on those decks. Two maps. This is the overcrowding map of London, and the next map is the wealth map. And if I just go back, it's overcrowded in the east, and it's wealthy in the west. We want this map to change, and I think it is changing in this city. I think this goes back to 2010, without a new one in 2020 will show some significant change. And there is development that's great. It's good. It's trying to do the right thing, and the architecture's excellent nowadays here. So I just want to talk about one project of ours very quickly in 5 minutes. It's called the Bourne Estate in Camden. It's a great public sector 1905 estate, Edwardian style classical architecture. Extremely popular, and it's right in the heart of Gray's Inn. And it was built as council housing, some of the very first council housing in the city. It's enormously popular, has incredibly robust architecture. Even today, most of it is actually quite run down. And it looks, fun enough, one of the few places in this city that looks a bit like Naples on a sunny day, if you go there. It's people occupying their deck accesses. It's the antithesis of the housing I showed you, the 1970s housing. It's really a very, very successful social place. It's now got leaseholders in it, which is nice. People are beginning to be able to buy their flats and to inhabit their flats and to mix themselves in with social housing tenants. Sometimes social housing tenants, as you know, can buy if they can find the money, but otherwise people are coming into these estates and they are mainly assisting them. And actually you can take photographs there nowadays and it looks like 1905 still. It's a remarkable place. And the architecture itself is serious public sector, public housing, which is very much admired. So we considerably consult people when we do housing. I guess so we should. I hope everybody does when they do it. And in this case came up with a new architecture for some spare land on the estate, which we tried to talk about the notion of deck access in a successful way, people communicating with each other, mums and buggies, growing plants on your decks before you go into your flats. I don't know if this points, does it? Yes, it does. So our housing here is one block there and one block on the corner there. Now this nice housing was commissioned directly by Camden Council, so it's genuinely public sector housing. And really what I want to say about it is I think it's admirable because first of all, in a world where we're really deficient in public money, this is a self-funding circular housing development where some of the flats are for sale, some are for what's called intermediate housing, which is you buy a bit and you rent a bit and in the end you step your way out of that renting to fully own it. And then there's some genuinely straightforward affordable housing for people who just never be able to buy a house. And this is a map of our Block 2 housing. You can see here the purple is highly affordable or massively below market rents. The pink is intermediate housing and the green is private housing. And this is pepper-potted, genuinely pepper-potted housing where people are walking up the same staircases and some have incomes of £250,000 a year and some have incomes not at all or on benefits. And I love this stuff and I would make it, there's a planner here, where is she? Wherever, or was. I would make it this absolutely the rules, that you can't get out of it with pepper pot on housing. And there's our new housing block arising in the corner of the estate. Part of the development is to replace play equipment and sports pitches and so on. And this is looking one way in the estate, and that's looking the other way at our housing in the distance. So new integrated 75 flats, totally self-funded within the public sector. And most importantly at all, to the huge credit of this borough, Camden, and many boroughs are doing this, it's free to the public purse because it's self-funding. And that's a little piece of the newness inside the historic street. So my final few words are, it's my policy words, strengthen planning policy so that you can't get out of pepper-potted housing. Banish mono-tenure housing. Don't build purely affordable flats, and don't build flats just for purchase. So never allow investment housing. I would say just never allow it. Sure, people are going to invest in housing, but make sure there's a mix per staircase. Just two final slides. In this great city, there's now really fine housing. We, by the way, for the Nordic people here, which I gather there are many, we now build really good housing here, and we take care of streets. We've been hugely influenced, at least I have, but certainly by Danish housing, for instance. But we're now at last producing the absolute highest quality architecture. And my final slide is, if it works, yeah, there's this slide, which isn't the greatest architecture, but it's ordinary architecture. Coffee shops on the corner, mixed-tenure housing, etc. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you so much. So moving swiftly forward, very warm welcome to Andrea Castellotti, who is a co-founder of Air Public and also the leader of the Tech London Advocates. One of the subgroups. You can talk more about it, but really appreciate Andrea being here, and this is all about how we're bringing Tech London advocates and Tech Nordic advocates together as well. So over to you.
Good afternoon. So Tech London Advocates have started a new chapter called Smart Cities. I'm not the leader. The leader is a lady called Larissa dos Santos, who works at the mayor's office. She is really an expert in smart cities, and she has decided to have a certain outlook in the work we're going to do, and really emphasize a bottom-up approach. So to see how the TLA can help communities, individuals engage and improve their lives and the lives of every other citizens. So I'd like to just say 3 stories to give a flavor of the trials and tribulations of the bottom-up approach. Excuse me, I'll start with a sort of personal story, which starts about 3 years ago, when air quality pollution was not such a hot topic as it is now. I was a sort of a cycle campaigner in Islington, and we were trying to convince the council to close a number of rat runs and to improve, to make it safer for people cycling. And one way we thought was to show that the rat runs had a higher level of pollution than sort of quiet residential streets. So we paired with Client Earth, Client Earth is the firm that, or lawyers that have, well, at that time just started to sue the UK government for not doing enough to fight pollution. And so basically this is something that you probably have seen. We put these tubes that measure NO2 on trees and lampposts, and we got a map, and we showed clearly that the rat runs, i.e. the colored column on the left, which is yellow, have higher pollution levels than the quiet streets, which were the blues. So the rat runs, so we showed basically what we wanted to show. The only thing is that it didn't end there, or actually it did end there in the sense that we run into a wall, which is the Islington Council, who have an air quality strategy, but they use the money just to produce reports and not actually do very much. Somebody else who instead was more successful was the Putney Society, who did a similar study and showed that the air quality on Putney High Street was very high, and they were successful. And just last month, Sadiq Khan put electric buses following the work that the Putney Society had done. You will notice the grin in Sadiq Khan, because he had a secret plot. So basically he took the buses from the Putney High Street and put it somewhere else. So in an area where the local residents didn't have the same political clout. And this is, I think it's typical, and I think that that is, it's one of the things that at the TLA Smart Cities will try to fight, in the sense that we will try to overcome and try to have a spirit of collaboration between citizens and local authorities. One of the so it really the data. I mean, I think it shouldn't be the job of citizens to get the data. So the local authorities need to provide data in a way that is accessible and analyzed so that citizens can then make the sort of smart choices. So at Republic, what we're doing is we're putting air quality sensors on electric vans that go around the city, with the goal of improving. This is the King's College map, which is one of the best in the world. London has about 120 fixed stations with state-of-the-art sensors. But basically there is a 0.01% of coverage. Everything else is modeled. And that's why we did our study in Islington, because the model doesn't work that well. So the red runs are not considered. The model works on data that is like, the traffic data is like 3 years old. So that is, we are now we're doing a validation stage. And so the dots there are where the readings, where we can actually get real readings and not estimated readings. Another approach is by a French company called Plume Labs, and they've just developed this personal air quality sensor so that people can basically they put it around their bag, and then they can see what pollutants they are exposed to. Actually, sorry, how much of NO2, this just measures NO2, they're exposed to. And of course feed the data to the whole system, so that everybody gains from the citizens' personal monitors. But the raw data is not enough to make proper decisions. And so, I was talking just now to somebody in for example, in Copenhagen, there is a company that is being contracted to analyze the data, all the raw data that is produced, and produce meaningful output. I just want to give you another example. This is a road safety campaigner that had to fight for about 3-4 years against Transport for London to provide bus safety data. So buses kill about 10 to 15 people every year. Tom Kearney here, he was almost killed. He was in coma for a couple of weeks. And then he started campaigning. He started finding out that the data wasn't collected. And again, it's not just data that is needed, because reluctantly, TfL does now publish bus safety data, but it's not analyzed, and it's still a fight between the campaigner and the city in trying to make the city safer. So we really need a different type of politics where citizens and local authorities work together for for better lives. Otherwise, the city does not become smarter. So these are some of the topics that we'll try to look at in the Smart Cities chapter of the TLA. There is in a couple of weeks there is an unconference where community groups, tech people, and local authority officers are invited and to try to solve some of the issues that will be raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. So interesting. It was so exciting for us to be part of this program. And actually, you mentioned the Copenhagen data program. It's run by Intention Consulting, actually, on the contract for Copenhagen City Council, actually picking up data from the public space and working on different ways of deploying the data and business models around the data and so on. And actually, we bring them into the program as well. And I'm in the process of trying to connect that with the data platform that Piero from Italy is running, and we're under the thing, so we can join the dots up, right? But super exciting. Thank you so much. Okay, so moving swiftly to our next speaker. Very excited indeed to welcome Torben Klitgaard from Blockstop in Copenhagen. Yeah, right behind me, fantastic. And I mentioned obviously the prize, so we are very, very excited. Blockstop in Copenhagen, partners Technology Advocates. They have also offered the prize of the Startup Solution Challenge, as I mentioned earlier on, and Torben can tell the rest of the story now. There's so much excitement going on. One of which is that obviously we're going to be reconvening in 6 months' time at Blockstop. So over to you, Torben.
Thank you, Jeanette, and thanks for having us. Thanks for allowing me for, in a very short while, to give you a sort of few examples of what liberty or livability is defined by from a Copenhagen and a Danish angle. On a personal note, I run the Blocks Hub, which is a newly established urban innovation hub in Copenhagen. It's a co-working space, it's a community, and it's a platform for more or less all stakeholders in Denmark and on an international scale that work with sustainable urbanization. And I start out by showing you this picture. It's where we live, or that means that's where we're gonna live, because this house is designed by Wim Koolhaas, the Dutch architect, not the Danish architect, but a Dutch architect. He built this house for us, and it opens in April 2018. That's sort of the center for the Danish Architectural Centre, alongside the Centre for the Blocks Hub, which is the Urban Innovation Hub that I'm running. So I must admit I very much agree with you, Matthew, and your conclusions in your presentation earlier on sort of the focusing on the diversity of building a livable city. That's very, very much focused to our thoughts and ideas on establishing and building communities within cities. So in that respect, I think from a Copenhagen standpoint, we very much tap into those conclusions. And that is more or less the reason why we decided a couple of years ago to set up this Urban Innovation Hub, which is very, very much sort of on the platform of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, trying to contribute to sustainable urbanization on a global scale. And what we're doing is to reach out to a variety of stakeholders within urbanization, architecture, design, construction and IT, in order to build a place in downtown Copenhagen, build a community where people can come, live, work and share ideas. And obviously it's very much talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. We focus on goal number 11, making cities inclusive and safe and resilient. So it's very much sort of a very down-to-earth, beautiful building, very much down-to-earth attempt to boost the area of sustainable development goals, focusing on urbanization in the area of Copenhagen. So what we do is we try to blend startups and SMEs and corporates, trying to develop with a newly established startup scene across architecture and design and tech, very much try to spotlight and focus on products and services from Danish, Nordic and international SMEs, and as such trying to invite corporates in expanding what we call their innovation capacity in their innovation strategies in order for them to work alongside with startups and SMEs. Exactly the same way that you're doing on a beautiful note here in London, of course, but we are trying to do that on a bigger scale in Copenhagen from next year onwards. And what we try to do is to match the companies in an attempt to not only match them, connect the partners, but also trying to sort of fast-track ideation, prototyping business concepts in collaboration with startups and SMEs. In order to reach out to the scientific community, we've established what we call the Science Forum, which is an industrial PhD network, very much inviting industrial PhDs across universities to come together in order to sort of cross-fertilize their research and learn and inspire from one another. And lastly, we are creating a tech accelerator program, and by the end of my short introduction here, I'll try to come back to that, because that is one of the prizes, as you heard Jeanette earlier. What we try to, so far, is to define sustainable urbanization, because obviously you can define that in many ways. We focus, and I know it's very, very difficult for the human eye to see what's up here in the slide, but I'm trying to run you through it very quickly. Very much we define livability as the overall main driver for developing sustainable urbanizations, sustainable cities, focusing on urban resilience, urban mobility and sustainable buildings as well. And not surprisingly, of course, the exponential growth of digitalization and technology is one of the key enablers in future urban areas, and that obviously goes for the themes that we're working on as well. The sharing economy and the circular economy is very sort of pivotal to more and more Danish architects, landscapes architects, material producers, etc., etc. That's what we're focusing on as well. And of course, urban governance, public-private partnerships. We cannot live, so to speak, without them. But zooming in on livability, it's very much focusing on designing livable cities, as we say, with a human-centered approach that provides healthy living conditions, etc., etc. And that is very much what we are trying to focus on, focusing on companies that work alongside those ways in Denmark. So when I say we from the hub is working within those themes, obviously it's meant to be that the companies we are attracting as part of the hub are working alongside those themes. And that's why I've chosen sort of a handful of examples. I'm very, very quickly trying to fast forward a series of cases here from Copenhagen. Probably you all know that it's alongside Amsterdam. It's one of the cities in Europe that we bike quite a lot. Those of you who've been to Copenhagen know that. Actually, the statistic says that 52% of people living inside Copenhagen are using their bike on their way to work or education every day, equaling more or less sort of 1.3 million kilometers each day. So it's very, very much a sort of a biking city. That's part of our understanding of how to create a livable city, part of the mobility grid, so to speak. Secondly, and for sort of a more in the sort of amusement part of the story here, is the harbour has been turned into not just a harbour but a swimming pool. We can actually swim and dive in the harbour now, and more people are doing so. And if you come to Copenhagen, please feel free to try. Most tourists actually come out of the water again, so it's not that dangerous to make the attempt. Another example is this waste power plant designed by Bjarke Engels Group, which is actually quite a funny story, because it's sort of the cleanest waste to energy power plant in the world. What it does is it transforms waste into electricity and district heating. And the attempt here, not only from a design point of view, actually it's a ski slope as well, and it's a hiking track during the summer. Actually, it's an attempt to twist and turn and influence the mindset of human beings, in the sense that we're trying to turn waste into energy. So it's sort of a mind change game. It's a mind mindset game changer here. So the building in itself is quite pivotal, it's quite huge, it's designed, like you can see, you can either like it or hate it, but definitely it touches upon sort of a mind shift transformation here, turning what was used to be a problem, namely waste, into a resource, which is electricity and district heating. And in order to sort of underline the mind shift aspect of this building, actually the chimney accumulates steam and not toxins. So the point of this building is actually in the construction phase right now. What misses so far and what lacks is the chimney, but they're going to install that sort of, I think, next year or so. But the point of the chimney in the right-hand side of the PowerPoint here is the smoke ring, and the point being that every time we reduce emissions of CO2 by 1 ton by transforming or converting to this technology, we celebrate by smoking one smoke ring, one gigantic smoke ring like this all over Copenhagen. So this is not actually a joke, it's actually going to be. And even though you might experience this as a joke, it sort of reminds people of the fact that nowadays we're transforming waste into energy. Another example is this horrible area. It's boulevards. We haven't got those many boulevards in Copenhagen, being a small city, but it's a boulevard that was transformed into this area, creating an urban space and a community-based, livable area within Copenhagen, which sort of both identified sort of creating social equity alongside financial equity. So it's very much a project a community-based project where people came together, deciding with the public client, the community of Copenhagen, or the municipality of Copenhagen, of course, very much decided, okay, what are we going to turn this area into? So the result being from this area to this area, and very, very much an area, an open space that invited people to come out during the summer, of course, to feel free to use the grass, to use the area in order to create relations and new communities. And very much a photo, very much the one you showed earlier on with I think it's a tennis court, or no, it's a football court. We're not that good to football, so we really need to practice. And in that sense, we created this area as an example of really sort of diving into the development of livable areas within the urban space. Lastly, I think this project needs mentioning. It's a project developed by a Copenhagen-based architectural company called Third Nature. And probably very like projects here in London, this is very much focusing on, again, like the waste plant, turning sort of what used to be a problem, namely heavy rainfalls in urban areas, into a resource. So how can we transform heavy rainfalls into something which equals a resource? This is very much what this project has tried to do. Where you construct sort of a perforated pavement, and the water runs through and into the soil and further up again, fertilizing trees and grass roots, etc., etc. So this is very much sort of an example, not an experiment, because it's up and running in Copenhagen. It's very, very much an example of how can you solve problems which used to be problems, and how can you turn a problem into a solution? How can you turn something which was banned earlier on, or not a very good thing for the urban development, into a resource? This project is very, very much like that as well. Coming to a close, I would like to just add to the beginning of my section here, the Urban Tech Acceleration Program, because that is one of the prizes for the companies working in this conference. We have an acceleration program up and running from this summer. We had an acceleration program within the Rocks Hub Innovation Hub last year. We call that Build Tech. That was very, very much focused on creating startups and tech within the construction industry. This is a bit more wide. This is for the urbanization area, saying that it sort of attracts, hopefully, tech startups with a wider agenda within the area of urbanization. and that program is up and running from summer 2017. It very much focuses on these areas, augmented reality, virtual reality, urban data, as we just heard prior to my presentation here from Public. Smart home technologies, very much in focus there. The built environment in general, 3D printing, urban mobility. Tech companies providing solutions and problem-solving technologies within these areas. That is what we're looking for. The Urban Tech, it says Smart City here, but Urban Tech Accelerator Program is trying to go for the best of the companies on an international scale. So we are trying to address companies and startups that already have a product or a service and is ready to be commercialized. The startups, as it's stated up here, will work within the overall field, and the program will have sort of an 80% share of international startups and a 20% share of Danish startups. And the prize here given is an opportunity to be amongst the 75 shortlisted companies, which we are going to interview very closely in order for them to go along in the program. So, having said that, I very much hope that the startups will work very, very spot on tomorrow. I'm looking forward to the challenge, I'm looking forward to the solutions. And whether you are out for a biking experience or a swim in the harbour in Copenhagen, I very much hope that some of you will join us in Copenhagen in October. Definitely, no doubt, you're all invited. We are, as I said, in the middle of Copenhagen, and I can assure you that we serve damn good coffee and a ride on a bike and a swim in the harbour. So you're all invited. Thanks for listening.
Wow, how exciting is that? That is super cool, isn't it? It's fantastic, and I'm so excited that we're working together with you guys. So, absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much, Torben, and obviously we will communicate more about both the Smart City Solution Challenge, the City of London Hackathon, and also the event in October. But before you can go swimming and cycling and all the rest of the stuff in October, you have to do some work as part of this program. That's the deal. So moving forward, I'm really excited also to welcome Chris Gawley, who's the founder and CEO of SpaceHive, and I'll leave Chris to share all the excitement about SpaceHive, but we worked together with SpaceHive for some time now, lastly at the Intelligent Community Challenge, which is a one-year urban innovation program that we ran for GE Lighting last year, which Ravensbourne won. Independent jury, but actually someone mentioned it earlier on, I think. Ravensbourne ran away with a prize of using LED lighting to aid the introduction of driverless cars, so there you are. Fantastic. So we love SpaceHive, worked with them for some time, and I'm very excited to welcome Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeanette, and a pleasure to be here to tell you a little bit about SpaceHive and what we've been building over the last 5 years. So my name is Chris Gawley, I'm founder of the company, set SpaceHive up. Do we have a clicker? We do. The reason I set SpaceHive up was I was really interested in the opportunity to open up civic space to new sources of creativity and funding. Civic space, an arena which belongs to all of us and nobody, obviously has a tremendous bearing on our quality of life, the health of local economies, the vibrancy of cities. Traditionally, we've relied mostly on councils, sometimes property developers, for financial and creative nourishment. And the idea with civic crowdfunding is, can we open the space up, make it a little bit easier for ordinary people, perhaps local businesses, to put forward ideas and share on the cost of making those things happen. It's an area where a lot of people seem quite willing to contribute ideas and funding. And so the challenge was, can we create a technology company, can we create a platform which lowers the barrier to entry for people who do want to participate and helps them to get great ideas, which benefits cities off the ground. So these are some of the sort of outcomes that really drive us and form our mission, if you like, to try and open up this space to new sources of creativity and funding. And of course, it's a timely idea in the UK at the moment because of the pressure on council budgets, but this really isn't about a sort of cuts offsetting mechanism, it's about trying to empower ordinary people, put them in the driving seat of change, enable it. So the idea of crowdfunding civic projects is not, of course, new. 150 years ago, We wouldn't call it civic crowdfunding, we call it public subscription. But people were contributing in large numbers, small amounts of money to pay for things like this, the base of the Statue of Liberty, in a campaign at the time run by Joseph Pulitzer, who owned a newspaper. And we also have been funding, using the same model, a lot of the UK's parks in Greater Manchester. Many of the statues you'll see around the UK also funded in this way. So this was citizens contributing to ideas that had the potential to improve local places. But you also saw in this campaign philanthropists and businesses contributing too. And what we've done is to try and use technology to make this process a little bit easier. And so really trying to create a way for anyone to be able to put forward a project idea. If you're a citizen change maker with an idea to improve a local park or transform the high street, you face a myriad of complications and complexities from finding funding to verifying the viability of your idea, forecasting your impact. Technology can help to distill those things down into simple processes that help to empower people by creating a better user experience. We also need to have a model where anyone can back change, whether you're a local individual or the Mayor of London. We need you to be able to come together through the same platform to help through good ideas. And in doing so, to break down the silos, if you like, that exist in this space between citizens and the state and business, so that people can collaborate to improve the city together. So a few examples of some of the projects we've done. These are all chosen from London. There's a project which we had last year to revive a Sli.do, which had been closed down 30 years ago in the South London borough of Peckham. It was a really popular project that captured people's imagination. They're actually backing the £70,000 cost of the feasibility there to get the idea off the ground. Creating growing spaces. You can see down in the bottom right-hand corner there, so a bunch of crocuses. A really nice project down in Croydon, where a guy took a site which was going to be used for development and said, actually, why don't we create a field for growing crocuses, for growing saffron? The reason being, it was a nod to Croydon's past. Croydon, as you may know, comes from the Latin creu don, meaning crocus valley. So he thought, what fun to bring that idea back to life and grew saffron and then redistributed it around the town. So a little bit of civic pride for Croydon. Up in the top left-hand corner there, the Mayor's CD car opening a project called Wells Street Market in Hackney, which is a new street market which help local businesses and young people in particular. So a real mixture of stuff, some of it to do with improving quality of life, some of it to do with helping the local economy. So over the last 5 years we've been working with government and business and citizens to test this model. We've now finished that design process and are ready to scale up, and in that time we've seen 266 projects delivered, 6.3 million raised, about 21 million now in the pipeline. Quite a high success rate for a crowdfunding platform, 53%. And interestingly, from the city's perspective, the municipality perspective, you've got 350% on average on council funding there. Because when the city's funding these sorts of projects alongside the crowd, they're enjoying much better leverage than they would normally. It's not just about the money though, it's also about the social impact. So we see citizens feeling a lot more empowered with this approach when they vote with their wallets for the kind of change they want to see in their neighbourhood, and they see these projects going ahead. They feel that they're able to shape their neighbourhood much more directly. And it's also creating enterprises, starting jobs, and of course physically transforming the environment. So I just wanted to walk you through how this model works in London. We have a partnership with the Mayor of London, but also Manchester City Council, a number of other different cities around the country. And just to explain how cities can collaborate with the crowd to make these sorts of projects happen. So the reason the Mayor's doing this is because he's really keen to help unlock some of the creativity that he knows is out there in the city to help make London's places better. But almost more importantly behind this is a desire to sort of democratise the way that regeneration works in London and give citizens a bit more power to shape the physical environment of the city. So there's a big social mission behind this for the Mayor. So the way that works, the Mayor puts up a fund, there's 4 million available to pledge directly to citizens' projects in the city, and actually we just launched a new round of that fund today. And you can get up to £50,000 for your project directly from the Mayor. If you have an idea, you go to the Mayor's page on Space Hub and you can upload your project, you describe what you're trying to do. In this case, somebody's got an idea to put a farm on top of a multi-storey car park. And we are able to identify that idea, and we then match it to relevant funding streams. So it's not just about raising money from your friends and your neighbours through the crowd. We also connect you to funds like the Mayor of London's and other companies and foundations as well. And you can then pitch to those funds for a pledge. So in part of the pitch for the Mayor of London, he's asking questions about community impact. Perhaps you'll ask to see some specific documents. You provide these, and we then verify your project. In this case, it's conducted by an organisation called Locality to make sure the project's viable, and you can then start crowdfunding your idea. Hopefully you're going to get a pledge from the Mayor. So it's him last year announcing pledges to 20 projects around the city. And you're going to have this very vibrant campaign. Hopefully all the neighbours locally and businesses will contribute, and the Mayor as well. And you hit your target. All the pledges that people commit are then charged, debited from people's accounts and transferred to the project creator, who then becomes contractually responsible for delivery of the project. And this is all about the output, the social impact, which we actually record, celebrate, and then share with all the backers of the project, from Joe Bloggs to the Mayor of London. So here's Sli.do opening up the street market I mentioned to you earlier, and as you can see, it's an approach that's not just about delivering tangible projects, but also really bringing people together and creating a lot of, hopefully, goodwill and social impact. So I just wanted to end there with the thought that this could work in the Nordics. Look forward to a discussion about that in due course. Thanks very much for your time.
Wow, how is that for empowering people? I think that's absolutely fantastic. You know, this is not councils and politicians decide what you want to do for these people, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. And we're actually in the process of introducing Chris and a team to folks in Copenhagen and the Nordics, so we can start to do some of that as well over there. So, final set of speakers on the sort of people and communities theme. Again, sort of great friends of ours, Dr. Will Pearson, Director of Technology here at Ravensbourne, and Mark Simpson, who are running the Makerspawn project. So, over to you. Who wants to speak? You'll go first. Fantastic. Set up. And just while Will does that, so the speakers from the last couple of sessions, so in the open forum debate afterwards, so a couple of the speakers had to leave, but if we can then invite the others up here, and a long list of line of chairs, then we're going to offer the chance to ask questions, and then we're also going to go through the Smarter Cities, the Sli.do questions that have come in, and quite a number have come in, so if you will hang yourself there. And you're in now. Fantastic, thanks.
Thanks, Jeanette, and good afternoon, everybody. My name's Will Pearson. I have the honour of being Director of Technology, a job I've done for 5 years. I've seen a lot of change on the peninsula in the last 2 years particularly. The first 3 we were promised, I think, 100,000, not 100, 10,000 homes, and we waited and we waited, and in recent months we've seen significant change, and we've had to adapt our own worldview, I think, in line with that change. I was inspired by the last 2 speakers, inspired to think we're doing something with almost no money at all for Makerspawn, unlike the crowdfunding opportunity. I'm wondering now whether we might, in time, explore that as an opportunity for our project. And the previous speaker had a great coupling of phrases, the mindset game changer. Again, I feel there's an element of that in Makerspawn. But what is it? A term coined by our director, Professor Linda Drew. Makerspawn is a response to our limitations in many ways with our prototyping facilities. They're a victim of their own success. They tend to depend on a supply chain of petroleum-based plastics that have travelled a long way to be here. Soft modelling for our students, basic forms of making using 3D print, using additive and subtractive processes, and very successfully deliver that value to our architecture courses, to our product design courses. But there was always a sense that we wanted to do more. We had a particular mission in mind, and that was to connect our designers with the source of their raw material more effectively. So Makerspawn isn't this. this is one particular part of Makerspawn. Makerspawn is a conceptual framework. You can tell I've recently got my PhD, can't you? Talk about methodologies and frameworks. But it is a series of events and workshops and activities that add up to something more than the sum of their parts. They're an attempt to get ideas like permaculture and the work of the great Australian Bill Mollison, who died recently, into the minds of some of our students. It's about trying to say, where does the natural world fit in to what you're doing? Any attempt to put carbon back in the soil, any attempt to improve air quality have got to be a good thing for all of us. And design has a role to play in making that more aware in the minds of our students, but also because we don't, I think, know our community that well. And I say that honestly as a member of staff who works here but lives outside the city, and because the peninsula has its entertainment hub, but the housing and the citizens are some way still distant from us, down on where the peninsula joins the main part of Greenwich. So we want to try and offer ways of connecting our students to these communities and the new residents who will be joining us here. We are inspired by the work of E.F. Schumacher, the work of Schumacher College, the great Satish Kumar. We want to treat the peninsula as an ecosystem. We want to put carbon back in the soil, as I say, by growing materials that then can be processed by students for their creative activities. So that's Phacelia, that's crack willow, that's fast-growing plants like maize and potatoes, from which we can extract starch, mix with glycerin, compress down to form bioplastics. That's about saying to our fashion designers, what can you do with this new material that we've made here on site? We haven't shipped it a long way across continents to be here, and we've put some carbon back in the soil, and any attempt to do that is to be seen as positive. E.F. Schumacher famously said, a man who uses an imaginary map thinking that it is a true one is likely to be worse off than someone who has no map at all. And so we have no map and we have no money. We weren't ever going, I think, to build a separate makerspace. We have Makerversity not far away, London Fab Lab. The early work we did with our steering group was trying to find how we were going to be different from other making facilities. And for right now, it is absolutely about those ideas of having pop-up workshops with our students. We did a hydroponic workshop, got them used to handling seeds and growing media. The next step is to work outdoors as the weather's improved. As we've worked with our partners, Night Dragon on the peninsula, we have access now to derelict wasteland of different quality. Wind is a problem, insurance and getting past that was a problem, but we've taken these steps and now we are ready to start really motoring. So this picture is of the jetty space, and those of you who have had contact with the peninsula over the last 6 months may know the jetty is a place on the Thames where an organisation called Formopolis previously worked to create a sustainable hub for cultural and leisure activity. We are now working to program in workshops. We've attended several, we're developing a set of our own, and well, I'll let Mark talk to you a bit more about those workshops and what happens next.
Thanks. So, as Will said, move on to the next picture. No, so we've been running initially a set of projects around hydroponics as an introduction to the idea of growing and design thinking. Run very quickly just using off-the-shelf equipment and designing a set of courses which can be delivered to the students, which we delivered here, as well as to publics outside of the college, so we can run it for schools and for interested parties. The idea is to introduce a simple growing system where people can grow their own vegetables and salad leaves. We also introduce Raspberry Pi and sensors so that they can connect and monitor this material, and then they can start sharing the data, and the idea is then to create a community event based around the jetty area where people who are growing these stuff within their flats and in the schools can all get together on a regular basis and create community salad bowls. So this is a method of starting to investigate the local community, their interest in what happens within the institution, as well as introducing all these technologies and stuff into the students' processes as well. The other project which Matescorn has currently done is we're part of the Digital Catapults Things Connected process. So we've got a LoRaWAN hub, which is going to be sited on the roof, which will cover the peninsula with the LoRaWAN network, which is an Internet of Things, smart data, low power bandwidth network. The idea there is to be able to have a test bed for enabling courses and interest in making smart city data more legible within the community. And then further to that, as we said, we've got this new site, external, where other forms of growing materials will take place with the students, but also with members of the community, so that we can start introducing the ideas of sustainability, design, and growing materials, and keeping the life cycle of products and everything in a local area. I think that's it.
So interesting and so local. So thank you so much to both of you. It's fantastic. So we have just a chance to ask questions when we come back. We're going to break for coffee now. So we've caught up quite a bit of time. So that's good. So wonder so 10 maximum 15 minutes break for coffee, and then if we can get the speakers from the last couple of sessions to come up here. After the coffee, then we're going to open up the debate Q&A and have a look at what is coming on Sli.do. So please continue to comment and ask questions. Okay, so enjoy the coffee. And don't forget to go and visit the partner stands outside, the SSAB and the Startup Guide, which is available for purchase outside. So see you shortly.
You really? I have to even sit here all day. I had to sit here for the stream. Is the stream over or is it still there? Yeah, it's still there. It's running right now. Yeah. Not so much. Like they're more louder because the speakers. Unless you can read speakers. I want the live to be clear. So well, I feel sorry for you. I don't think I could deal with it. Take it easy.
So it basically works with the summer in the factory and release to the market. So it's not really similar to growing part, which is like they already had it. Just like you sell it. But I would like to show that there's some reason for something there's something. I don't know. It's not Yeah, the content is like really dense. But I can find it more. I'm not really sure if something complementary is similar and this would change. Because, as I say, they're not I think there's something from Scotland. So they neither like I don't know, yeah, they just took and there's a really long process to work on something, but when they sell it, it's already done. So what would that mean? Yeah, I would like to, in the step of the work, I would like there should be a place where they receive the sample. I don't know, maybe like I should bring to the market without the work of the factory. I don't know, because I would like to create this. You want to create more snacks, that's what we're going. But I'm not sure if they actually are.
But then there must be like, because you're going to buy tuna, salmon, like from the that's very different if you're going to buy snacks. If you buy or you can buy salmon, or you can buy salmon chopped up, or you can buy salmon.
So how can I like maybe I can work to explain like what you say?
Very pleasant.
Very patient. Yeah. So
They will
should be the main one is the factory is near the site prepares and that's the main thing. They are famous for that. So you could smoke it, but they need to because they usually sell for restaurants and hotels. They don't sell. They're just a waitress and they used to sell to normal people, not like gourmet. Different way, so it doesn't charge. So maybe the gig is just prepare it.
Is there a way we could put some lights on? Sorry, panel. Some lights on the panel. I am not the guy. Who's where's he on?
So therefore it was split it.
So they want to be yeah, because I don't want to create a factory. They already have decided, like, kind of, it's a way like prepare for you, like not just like it's something that they give to their body.
It's like if I was
So are you getting food from the yeah, it's just another way to sell it. Yeah, because as I say, it's just for filming, like for really expensive hotels.
I think it's best for you to be different as well in the sense that realistically you don't want to compete with factories that only sell something.
No, it's the same.
That's what I need to say.
The
I need to say it's good for you not to compete with them.
oh, okay. Because if you do, yeah, that's not realistic. Yeah. That's why it's just way to only choose that. So it's just another way to make money.
Because they can buy it for you. I love my Bible, but still No, they're not, because they took from Scotland. Exactly. The point is that I have 2 clients for my market slash brewery, because there's a new brewery and a true one that should be really famous, was very famous. They closed in 90 something.
Sorry.
And now they're going to
Sorry, I'm Darren. We haven't connected as well.
and the other one is selling the factory. And that is compared to the street. But the point is that
I've only got a couple of minutes, so I'm holding my goodness. Come on, where is he? Oh, you got coffee? I'll just grab one, it's fine, it's fine. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I think he's email you. Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm trying to find the thing that,
Okay. So your name, you know, the golden, preferably. But
so it's like, okay, so it's like, you say that now we need to feed it.
So I was there in 2005. So that was when we
So it's like educate the less.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a really farming fish.
Is that where you were? So right now, so that picture is what the largest. So where we were. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Massive. It's very big. Yeah.
No, it's not done. Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very safe place. Yep. No, we don't like yeah, I mean, so, yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So, we're a UK, so we're a traditional, we've got traditional difficulties where, how can we be everywhere, but not everywhere, right? So, well, with my London accent, but yeah, so, what I'm doing at the moment is I'm interested in hashtags. So how we had such a hard time actually. So first thing is identify who we're doing it. Secondly, what is the easiest way alignment? So what do we do? We work on two, right? very focused on exactly how the cities are that was quite a bit. So if projects align forward with that, then we are more likely to focus on these. Yeah. Yeah. So we're just taking a yeah, now it's so that's good. But for example, how I'm imagining that is aligning the the area where we're talking about. Yeah, and so we've got at the moment we've got 5 spaces that we're going to so yeah, yeah. Yeah. I'm sure there's ways of figuring it out. Yeah. That's a lot more time. So I see this as what are we saying? The first was the quickest from it, we are always
Friends, sorry.
Sorry? In fact, that would be a really good
Good, within your project room, what, as in, they're going to have a competition with it? It's like build a piece of furniture for them, what with them, design it and then build it, and then yeah, so it's every year, so it's stressful. They do it no, it's the first time. Yeah, no, it's good. So I had Penrose. Yeah.
No, let me. Yes, he is. He is. We just got back from excellent. Yeah. Yeah, and I think I'm figuring out how to do that in the UK to make sense that I love
Yeah, you have to do it after. And then you get a juice behind it. You get the
It's okay, enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's get everybody to come back in. You've got it. Oh, this is going to be quite Right, so let's get underway. So we need the speakers who are still here to come and take a chair, and then we're going to do some Q&A, and we're going to look at the questions that are coming on Sli.do. So the speakers that are still here, please, if you want to, if you can take a seat in one of the musical chairs, you know. The purple ones are the nicest. Stephen, run. The musical chairs, if you get your bottom in quick, then you get the purple ones over. Done. Torben and Chris as well, please, if we can just have you up there. And then leave it at that for a second, actually. I just want to talk you about it real quick. Okay. So, yeah, we probably have. Is everybody in there? So we can sort of, some people have gone, but then some people have left questions as well. Is everyone in here who wants to be in here? Yeah? Okay. Right, just leave it at that one slide for 1 second, actually, if people are in here. So what I just want to show you, and I know the people at the panel is right behind you, right? So, so I just want to draw your attention to this. So what we started to do, using Sli.do, as we said, many of you have already started saying, here's the sustainability area that I'm interested in. So we're going to look at that a little later on, but that is actually how it looks right now, which is really interesting. So not that interested in the engineering side, which is interesting. But look at how the others are sort of divided completely equally, actually, is really interesting. So here are the 8 sustainability areas. So these are the round tables that we're going to be moving towards tomorrow. So I just want to show how you're using the Sli.do tool. And if you haven't already expressed an interest on the Sli.do tool, in the poll as to what sustainability theme you're interested in, please do so now, because we're going to come back to that a little later on, right? So what we're going to do now is have a bit of an open debate forum. We've heard so many interesting speeches. There's kind of two elements to this. One is people haven't had a chance to ask you questions, and then also, if you can get it up, can you? Afterwards, so you can take this one off now. And then we've had a number of questions in on the actual Sli.do tool, and as I said earlier, they have all been recorded. So we can put them into the whole Q&A and make them part of the theme going forward. But just starting with yourselves now, and you can also ask each other, by the way. This is like a work environment, it's not a formal thing. So I just thought I'd let people in the room sort of ask a question of the speakers if you have any, and then when we have no more sort of direct speaker questions, we'll have a look at what's coming on Sli.do. Yeah, is that okay? So, audience questions, anybody? And we actually probably need a mic, so that may be me running around with a mic, but that's all right, because you need one as well. So, any questions from the floor to start with, to the speakers? I thought you were all caffeined up and hyped up to ask lots of questions now, but no? No? Okay. Well, yeah. So the speakers, I'm sure you must have questions for each other, and it could be about, you know, maybe working together, or, you know, I think there's been so much inspiration coming out of all the speeches. So don't be shy. Any questions? Stephen, yeah. So we've got a microphone which hopefully works. So they both work, do they? Oh, fantastic. Okay. Yeah, over to you.
So to my fellow panelists, one of the things that vexes me a lot is the economic model. I'll just take an extreme example, but I think it's representative of this issue. My girlfriend works in the water industry, and she says water is free, but if it didn't go through chlorination, be piped and provided professionally, it would never be something you would drink. You can't just give water away, it requires something put into it. And so, reflecting back onto information and the city itself, I worry slightly that everyone thinks that everything's free, and therefore by default we're going to end up with the most mediocre cities in the world, because information isn't being curated, isn't being created to a high standard, and there's no money to pay for it. And it goes back to my example from yesterday, where a city said, well, we've got all this great infrastructure in place, but we've got no information. So we built ports, we have nothing to go in it. So really my question to the audience is, what's the model that's going to carry us through all this? Because if there isn't a model, I just don't see where society goes.
Do you want to give us perspective on that? Perspective?
I don't know how much about this area, to be honest. I mean, I guess a couple of thoughts. One is we still have tax receipts, we still have a state that's still able to fund these sorts of strategic projects, still willing to invest in infrastructure that can open up new market opportunities. I would have thought that if that's a challenge, that the state could be persuaded to help open up a space that could facilitate that kind of innovation. The other thing is, it's not just about the state, it's also about what businesses can do, and, you know, from my perspective, you know, we wanted to build a crowdfunding platform for civic projects, but had to make sure that it was a sustainably funded service, and so part of the task was designing a business model to support the service, and perhaps in relation to a particular challenge on water, there's a way to create a business model that could unlock that opportunity without necessarily relying on strategic investment. But as I say, don't know a huge amount about the space, so don't pretend to be able to comment authoritatively.
Well, regarding air quality, the mayor is promised to spend £875 million, mostly on new vehicles. However, there is a sort of decision process on where to spend the money, and if you don't have the data, then you are likely to spend it badly. So investment in data pays itself, and so the municipalities, I think smart municipalities should invest in and can see that it pays.
Yes, hi, Gary Ling. I must say, we're missing someone from this panel, and that's the guy from Singapore who pitched the most extraordinary smart city thing I've ever seen in a third world country, where he talked about going vertically and creating even more inequality. And then on the end, we've got the gentleman who was talking about mixing social housing so that the people who spend 250 or 500 grand on a London flat can be put in with people who are at the bottom end of the of the spectrum and don't control their kids properly and scratch their cars. So all I'm trying to do is to highlight this issue of inequality that doesn't seem to have been discussed too much here. I must say, before we stopped having coffee, I was actually clapping a project that was all about creating a community salad. Guys, let's get real. The inequality issues that are faced by smart cities are huge, and I can only assume the guy from Singapore's gone back to his office to sell more flats, and I appreciate you being here. Did you hear his thing this morning? Okay, you missed something special. How big an issue is inequality in all the projects that you're involved in? I've had my say, thank you.
Let me just add a real quick point to your question, Stephen, about, I'll come back to you about data and what's the model. And that's actually one of the things that we're going to be looking at as part of Smarter Cities now, is how can we develop business models, and how can we work together around data sharing? So going back to both the Copenhagen story, the Hitachi program, that is actually all about collecting anonymized data and selling it on, obviously anonymised, to private and public sector organisations that actually want to purchase that data, right? So the model is, the more people that put data in, obviously the more data is available. If everybody's paying for that, then there is a model around it, yeah? And then of course there's the London data store that the GLA have been working with here in the UK, and a lot of you have some knowledge of that as well, Stephen, don't you? So, and again, a lot of data has been collected, but it's actually being used terribly well. Because although the GLA have kind of sat on this project, so they can't actually mandate any councils to go and use it. So there is a lack of model there, in a sense, right? But that's part of what we're going to be exploring here. It's about this data share and how can we actually help each other develop models, and partly tapping into that EU project. So that's some of what we're going to be picking up. But excellent question, because that is at the heart of it, isn't it? And as you said, Andrea, you can do things intelligently based on data, or not very intelligently, if you don't know what you're doing, right? If you have no information to back up. So absolutely right. So there were some points, to your question or your point right now about inequality. You wanted to add something to that? Yeah.
It's just, sorry, is it Gary? Yeah, just really to add to your point, because that's just one thing that struck me through this, and the projected images of these digitalised cities and spaces look absolutely fantastic, and it's really exciting. And coming from a big industry that I do, it's something that we want to be involved in, and we really need to know what's going on at grassroots, because I'm not sure how these ideas get communicated up to us as manufacturers when we're considering new products and new ways of working. But one thing that strikes me, perhaps just coming from a little bit of my background, is I grew up on a council estate in Stoke-on-Trent, which, as you probably know, is apparently, according to Mr. Nuttall, was the capital of Brexit. Those council estates still exist, and I just wondered, having experience of what they're like now, how do you digitalise those people? How do you bring those people into these fantastic looking spaces? And I think that's probably similar to what you said.
donate £5 to a playground and using technology and so on to do it. You can actually pay people, but that's a beautiful question, isn't it? Martin, you want to question?
It's a question I've seen most public officials dodge ever so elegantly, like an action hero in a movie. It's the question of 56% of all jobs going away in the next 10 years. We cannot re-qualify people quickly enough for those jobs that are being re-qualified for and not disappearing before they have been re-qualified. What are your take on it? Universal basic income, or do you have another solution? And this is also addressing the inequality and the Brexit.
From Green Tech Challenge in Copenhagen, by the way, so we sort of moved here. Anyone wants to comment on that point?
Can I just pick something up? I mean, related inequality, the fact that, in theory, the people who are, on the poor side of the equation, they may not have a job now. They're sure as hell will definitely not have a job in 10 years' time. I'm just reflecting that we need to be pretty robust about the fact that, to pick up on that point about, I know you didn't say this, but I hear it all the time. I don't want to share with a noisy family who leave their rubbish out at the bottom of the stairs. It's something I hear all the time around privately funded, privately bought into blocks. And I think it's got to... Yeah, you are saying. Good, okay. Listen, people in my office working on housing say if I'm going to bust a gut and get a mortgage and buy a flat, I don't want the same litter at the bottom of them. These are young people. I'm just saying architecture or procurement has to get as wise as tech. And it's in danger of being lagging way, way behind. We've got technology, we've got access to information, and yet we really are going to leave the poor behind. It picks up all of these points, and if we don't start addressing that in a bold way, I was saying to someone earlier, a more authoritarian way, actually, sadly, this country, Stoke-on-Trent, London, everywhere, we are going to have vastly increased inequality. Remember that no one can afford to buy anything in this city on any kind of medium income. So we are heading for a kind of car crash of homelessness and joblessness and separation if we don't start, I think, sadly laying down a few rules.
And actually the point about the inequality, has at least been attempted to be addressed, isn't it, by the government? It's the digital divide and how do you make broadband available for everybody and stuff. But, at that kind of level, but I actually think maybe the problem is increasing because there's all parts of art here becoming more and more sophisticated and talking about the adoption and development of these kinds of solutions. And then there's all these guys that we're talking about now who's like the mid-just have gone on to broadband, but we're already accelerating ahead into the next stage. What's happening here? I think there is absolutely a divide that may be widening. Sorry, yes, indeed.
Yeah, I think it's a case of education, not architecture, to tackle this issue. So the point that you make, how do you stop this kind of behaviour? Maybe architecture can go some way to doing this, but I think it's more a case of education.
Education and affordability, I guess. We might be able to educate people, but what if they can't afford it? I think that's part of it, isn't it? Yeah. Do you want to?
I think education is actually going to change fundamentally, and I actually don't think it's actually going to help necessarily. I mean, technology is going at such a pace that if you spend 25 years of your life studying, well, I mean, you're going to be in a radically different world. I mean, the moment I started my university degree, I was done, and just in the university, I mean, things change so fast, and technology, and actually, education is profoundly outdated, I think, overall. So I think that is a concept that will have to change dramatically. But on your point as well, I actually agree that just mixing very different type of people or classes and just like pretending the differences are not there are not just going to make the differences go away. So I don't think that actually is like
And the point is that
that the people that you're talking about, the rich people, if you were here before the coffee break, you can see the future that they're building for themselves. It's vertical, it's high, and they're actually, it's symbolically looking down on the rest of us. I mean, it was just the most amazing thing that I've ever seen, put up on the screen. The guy was saying with a straight face. And either side of it, we had people from the public sector talking about, putting into a community salad bar. I mean, it was just amazing. And they even had a religious content to it. It was built within religious, cultural norms of society. But you can just go on the people down below. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Yeah, just a quick word about sort of technological unemployment. It's more likely that a lawyer will lose a job than a plumber. So we don't know how it's going to turn out. Yes, if you're a driver, but if you're sort of a skilled worker, a manual worker, you're I think, less likely to lose a job than if you are an accountant.
I agree, the nurse will have a job after the doctor loses his. So the caretaking jobs will remain for a few more years than the other ones. But my thing is, whenever I phrase this question, whenever I hear this question addressed, 10 years, 56% of all jobs, accountants, lawyers, gone, doctors, gone. There is not an answer. People dodge the question. They will say, well, we'll make up new jobs, or we will make up, we will re-educate people. But how are you going to re-educate people when we are halving the speed by which computers double their intelligence, their computing power, all the time? This is not being addressed. We're not being proactive about it. We are talking about having cities that are smarter than us in 15 years. And I don't think this is it's not being addressed at all.
So we're approaching the questions of what do we do about it, right?
Yeah, I think this kind of new revolution, it's not an industrial revolution, but an information revolution, is obviously going to change the whole outlook of what we consider work to be and what we consider a job to be. I'm probably less worried about lawyers losing their jobs and accountants losing their jobs, not because I've got anything particular against those people, but you've got educated people who are adaptable and who can probably change what careers and what they're doing, and they've got more access to resource. I know from my experience, and my wife works in the prison system, and she deals with rehabilitation of young offenders, and she's a civil servant. What she sees are third generation families where work isn't even a consideration. It's not because these people are kind of work shy, or the typical, the poverty porn that we see on television, is absolutely horrific. It's not that. It's just never even gets to the radar because the aspirations are so low. So, okay, we leave accountants behind, but you've already left these generations behind as well. So what do we do? I agree with you, universal benefit. Why not? Why keep people on the breadline? We're a rich country. Pay people enough to live on, and then those who want to work, because there's going to be fewer jobs anyway. But my political views creeping in.
I've recently made the decision to go live in the north, so I'm now living north of Bradford. So I'm living in an industrial area that's gone through a couple of industrial revolutions, and clearly been left behind as part of the process. I'm a little bit student of the 1910s to 30s in terms of when electricity arrived, and the major industry in 1890 in America was ice packing on the Delaware River, and they packed it in straw, and carts and horses, and there was a whole ecosystem. And I just wonder whether we're coming out of a period of stability, we collectively, a generation, and we don't know what the future looks like, and we're grappling with what that looks like, going back to your point. But it's hard to see at this point in time, because we're in the middle of it, and all those things are yet to come. But if we don't solve some of the problems that we currently have today, we may not get there. And I was at the Northern Powerhouse event last week, and we went through the key themes, and the themes actually slightly different to these: connectivity and transport, economics and growth. But one guy stuck his hand up and said, quality of life, where's that, right? Because if all these things come to pass and quality of life goes through the floor, what's the point? Maybe just going to the rest of the audience here is, of the speakers is, where's quality of life in all of this?
And what is it?
But to me, it seems that we've got lots of discussions going on in the same panel, but we started off by you asking what's sort of the viable business model when everything is free. I think that's a fundamental question in the business world. Maybe we're going to tackle that question tomorrow. And you posed the question on the inequality, which is so core to building up a modern society. Of course, I don't say I agree or disagree with anyone, but it's definitely one of the key issues.
We're logging the questions, by the way, in debate and also what
Great.
you do. So,
Great. There might be sort of a red thread between the two. I very much see that. I think in order for us to come up with any kind of solutions on what kind of fundamental new business models are we seeing into, we can look to the web, the industry around Google, etc., etc. What kind of learning can other industries sort of tap into in developing new viable business models? I'm not saying I'm having it all together, but I think sort of being inspired from other industries, being inspired from the Linux world. So what happened to IBM and Microsoft when open source was already there? They changed dramatically their business models. What kind of inspiration can that lead us into when we talk about electricity, water, energy, etc., etc.? Going to Copenhagen, the city data exchange, the platform the city of Copenhagen has created is very much sort of a Creative Commons data open source platform. What are the viable business models on top of that data platform? The answer is it's very, very difficult to see. Are we going to stop looking? Are we going to stop developing new business models based on that? No, of course not. So the answer might be to your questions. We don't necessarily know exactly what the future will bring. We just know historically that we did not get unemployed sort of overall. I think through the exponential technology growth, through the fact that BNP has been risen for centuries now, people have not got unemployed in the scale that we're talking about here. And if they do, what are they going to do? So I think we can look into. I'm a sort of a fundamental optimist without answers. So in that respect, I think we're going to look into new business models tapped on sort of a Creative Commons mindset. Does that entail in Danish borgerløn? Please help me out here. The citizenship salary, it might do. Is that viable in Asia, in Southern America? It might not be. Is that viable in Europe? It might be. You have to tackle those questions. But those are very, very big issues. But to me, they are very much linked with the question you posed about sort of what kind of resilient or viable business models can we create for a future we don't know anything about, actually.
So that's all about, the last bit was all about, should we actually pay everybody kind of a basic salary just for being a citizen, right? So, and how does that play against, what's happening with the public sector and benefits being cut and people, some people are not having the skills for this, and we'll be talking about some jobs being outplaced by technology and so on. Yeah, so good point. We're going to definitely be talking about some of these questions. And I think in the roundtables tomorrow, I really want to make sure that we say, right, if this is an area we think we should actually do some work on, then we need to log them as one of the challenges of the roundtables. So we're going to be sort of playing these back. But any other thoughts or questions sort of on the room or in the panel before we look at the questions behind us? You want to say?
Yeah, just very briefly. I mean, my only comment listening to a lot of this is I'm not sure how much to do with smart cities any of this is. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, which is not a criticism. It's just that a lot of what I think you're reaching for in positing this idea, and indeed yourself over there on the left about inequality, is political solutions. I'm not sure that smart cities as much. No.
Right. Well, what was happening this morning as part of this whole show was a man put up a tower in the sky.
Do you mean the one we saw just earlier with the mist?
The Indian
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Chairman Wong from WOW, yeah?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're building a whole brand new smart city based on, as far as I can see, the centerpiece was a solution that promoted inequality.
I know, but all I'm saying is that I think, smart cities is a very vague concept, and people project into it a lot of, whatever they want, it seems to me. I mean, it can mean data, it can mean, apparently, frameworks for inequality, it can mean large buildings, it can mean the universal basic income. I mean, I don't know what the edges of it are, but all I'm saying is...
That's the whole point of this...
Okay, but it's also about politics, what you're talking about here, and it's about if you want to create communities which are equitable, and you want to have a planning system which regulates that and produces those outcomes, and that is also a political responsibility. It's not about putting in place frameworks for data or whatever else Smart Cities does. And I just think we should be honest about that. And when you're reaching for solutions to potentially looming crises, I hope you're right, I hope we have an optimistic outcome on this. We might not do. Then it might be that politics is a powerful role to play in this as well. And there's not, and more than that, technology might also be something that is at risk of producing the wrong outcome. And I think we just should be honest with ourselves as a community that when you have a relentless progress towards automation and systemization in the way that we're encouraging through the smart cities debate, it seems to me, we've got to also be honest with ourselves about the human cost of that, potentially. And
now you're answering my question.
Great, so we're in alignment, sir.
I think it's fantastic.
It is potentially a very anti-human project, smart cities, and we should be aware of that risk.
So I think what that is telling us in this particular debate, which I think is super interesting, is we need to think about, so what are the boundaries of what we can hope to achieve with this Smarter Cities Now initiative, unless someone was about to go into politics. There was somebody who offered me a political career a little while ago and I turned it down, because it's kind of like not what I do really. So maybe we should think about things. So the question is like, what can we actually usefully achieve within this forum? And I think the data area and the business models in the world where everything is free and all of that is absolutely part of intelligent cities. But we probably can't hope to solve some of the questions that you're asking us. Yeah.
Just 2 seconds of glimpse into the optimism here, right? I think this gentleman over here is actually, the way I hear you, you're advocating for a more sort of multi-dimensional definition of smart cities.
Exactly. I'm also suggesting that as a panel, with all the different expertise and what you bring to the table, you recognise the limitations that gentleman just said, which is that all of this discussion will turn out to be very inhuman unless we start to take into account what this gentleman calls some political, realities.
I very much agree on that note. I think what we're debating in Copenhagen right now is, you know, the classical hype curve of smart cities, and I think 2 out of 3 people are sort of thinking that smart city is all about technology. And of course it's not. It's a much more multi-dimensional concept. And if we want to develop cities, it's very much for human beings. It's for quality of life. It's for stopping the processes of ongoing inequality projects. I very much agree on that. So, but the point being that sort of the hype curve has 2 sort of top points, obviously, and we're more or less just on top of the first curve, only talking about technology. I think the technology discussion it doesn't have to end, because it will never end with the exponential curves that we are facing. But we will have to sort of integrate the technology that we learned from phase 1 in this discussion, and then take that on board in discussing inequality, social aspects, social consequences, the ways that the political system can sort of look upon the variety of projects that raises the issues on inequality.
Yeah, and that is why we had one of the sessions today about people and communities, because it has to be the case that people and communities and the needs of people and communities have to drive this way, and technology being an enabler of what people need. It's interesting actually, if the Future Cities category, I think John has gone, but it's interesting, Scott Kane, who's the Chief Business Officer at Future Cities, and been working with some times, and he stood up at a conference not so long ago and he said, you know what, what's a smart city? He said, actually, it's about happiness. You know? Think about this. And he said, actually, if you're disabled and it's hard for you to cross the road, and somebody gives you an app or some form of technology that enables you to cross the road in a way that you weren't able to before, then you are living in a smart city, and you are damn sight happier than you were before, right? So that is because technology is enabling you to do stuff that you couldn't before. And that is all, you know, anchored in a human need, isn't it? So I think that has always got to be the starting point. It's not what can we do with technology, but what do people actually need, what can enhance people's lives.
Just a final note, when you say that, I came to think of a guy saying, okay, well, what's a smart city? And you know, in the urge to define what a smart city is, he said something like, the smart city is a city where you have sort of where people are asking high quality questions about what kind of city they want to live in. Full stop. That's smart city in the sense that it's smart thinking of the people living in the city. That kind of thing brings us away from the technological focus that smart city development has been focused on for so many years now.
I also think, sorry to hang on a little bit, there's also a risk that in the quest for more smartness, more data, more technology, that actually makes us a little bit stupid. And a lot of the time, listening to this on these debates, I think, you know, we are obsessing over the opportunity to gather ever more data and create better and better frameworks for stuff. And I often think, listening to this stuff, behind the quest to do this, there's some common sense that could be applied that could get us to a solution a lot quicker. And it comes back to what I think you were saying earlier, which is that, you know, we do not need to harvest reams and reams and reams of data to know that we have a pollution problem in this city. A courageous mayor could stand up and say, I'm going to deal with this. And I'm not saying it's therefore wrong to collect the data, but let's also be honest with ourselves. That a lot of these problems are perfectly solvable with a bit of political courage, and that can get us to our goal faster. And it might well be a smarter solution, therefore.
It's curious, I'm an optimist too. I'm certainly not negative about the future. And one thing we've talked about, technology, yes, politics, yes, but economics in this city is beginning to create social mixing, actually, because there's such a shortage of housing that people are looking to go to places all over the city. They're stretching their boundaries, they're starting small businesses which, to my mind, didn't exist 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And I'm talking partly about the kind of hipster coffee shop on one level. Hipsters didn't used to serve coffee, they could serve coffee now, and they do it beautifully and make the city better. But people are, through population pressure and price, pushing further and further into the kind of backcountry, into the outback of the city, to live communally with other people in estates where you buy a leasehold inside a deck access block because it's near the new overground. And actually, I think things are happening beyond technology and beyond political kind of infrastructure in a way. They're happening in a good way, so there is room for optimism.
Yeah, hello. A colleague over here just talked about education. I think it is absolutely fundamental. Our curriculum is prehistoric. It's unbelievable. You could pick any subject at any, I'm talking secondary level, you could pick any subject and understand that it does not prepare our children for their future. It does not give them the context or the language with which they can become meaningful members of a community. It's in the hands of experts like yourselves. So that's why our communities are unable to actually challenge the experts, which is a big issue at the moment, of course. We're experts. But the point being that if we were able to rewrite and understand the curriculum, therefore the language was available to those students, they would then become a meaningful part of building and developing everything we're talking about. You can't just thrust people into the world post 20 years old and expect them to contribute and to actually have any value or meaning. There's one subject at school which has a value, and it's called PHSE, and it's taught on a Friday afternoon, and everybody hates it. And it's about the context of children in the lives of their peers, of their situations, of the issues that really concern them, things like gender, things about sexuality, about drugs, about domestic violence, and it's swept under the carpet. Everybody gets rid of it, nobody wants to teach it. I know a lot about it because we created a centre to actually try and teach it in a more meaningful way. But I think you really can't begin to have the debate unless we start at that root, and at the root of our education. What are they taught about the built environment? What language is there? Do you know what they're taught? They're taught about Corbusier's Villa Savoy, they're taught about the Acropolis. That's the built environment for children learning art history, okay? Give us a break, you know, it's not good enough. And I could just strip back chemistry, physics, literacy, numeracy, every one of those things is not preparing them at all. It's preparing them for a kind of old-fashioned rigour that's in the Dark Ages. I'll stop.
Absolutely. Just conscious of time, we'll do a few more codes. It's fantastic, by the way, and I think it's exactly the kind of way we need to plan. So we just need to pick up the slide as well, but pass it again.
So I'm a tech optimist. I have the great pleasure, and I'm very grateful for doing so, of working with green startups all around Europe. So I'm very optimistic about the tech. I'm pretty sure that we will see resource abundance in most areas. What I'm not so optimistic about is how we are going to handle it. I think that the limit for the potential of the next 15, 20 years is just how courageous we are going to be. And I think that right now we're still approaching it with a linear industrial mindset, just as the gentleman mentioned. We're not encouraging people to be more courageous and more creative. We're training people to become more machine-like while we're actually getting machines that are better machines than machines are. So I think that getting the human back in that is extremely important. And how do you imagine a world? And that's where I think the smart city will provide more or less free energy, buildings that can morph at will, in an almost infinite amount of food. Any kind of data that we already have, more data available than Leonardo da Vinci would ever dream of. Imagine if he had that in his phone. I mean, he would not leave his apartment for 2 months. So how would you imagine the life once resource abundance is a possibility, and do you think it will be available for the general quality of life for people? That's my question. It's universal basic income's just like scratching the surface of that.
Yes, I just want to say about also the tech, and you were suggesting an app for the disabled person. And actually, I would suggest that the disabled person would prefer to have a human to help her. I mean, of course, an app can help in finding the human.
That's the problem, though. Where does that human come from?
Yeah.
Well, we'll have a lot more free time.
I think we have also a lot of assumptions. I think we scratched the brief this morning about, there was a gentleman questioning what the market has established today, that the world is destroyed because now we don't have as much as human interaction as we used to have, because people are spending 50% of their time on a mobile phone, and that would destroy society. And what the parallel that I heard somebody drawing is, you take a kid today that spends 6 hours a day gaming with other peers that have shared interest, and that guy is regarded as asocial, somebody that has no life, no real friends. Meanwhile, if that happened 40 years ago, he would sit in his room alone, doing nothing, and maybe because he was bullied at school. But now if he spends time on his phone or gaming, he is asocial. But it's actually much more social than he would have been 40 years ago. So I think there is a lot of assumption thrown out very often.
Were you one of those kids?
No.
Okay. That's a good point, though.
There was a point made about information. I went to Local Enterprise Partnerships, a regional development organisation last week as an SME. And the guy said, what are you looking for? I said, well, I'm looking for a place to locate my company that has low pollution levels, where I can travel, where the children of my employees will not be going to schools next to main roads, because they're getting back to the pollution, where there's an accessible workforce, technically trained, but not necessarily academically trained. And he looked at me horrified, because he didn't know where that place existed in his city. And he said, I've got a building. I said, yeah, but I'm a virtual company. I don't need a building. I need a place where there's community. Well, I don't need a building. And I worry slightly the smart city has been characterised in terms of buildings generally near a main road and a large amount of traffic. And we're just building this social disaster as opposed to building a city that actually is relevant to a company like the company which is mine, which is virtual and data. So I think we're slightly on the wrong path at the moment, I would argue. We've got to find a way of making cities much more livable, back to quality of life.
So how do you do that, Stephen? So
We should not be choosing projects tomorrow that are technologically based, that destroy the workforce and do all the things that we've just talked about. We've got to change the paradigm here so that any project we select has to pass 4 or 5 key tests, which are improving quality of life and not polluting the hell out of our fellow human beings, etc., etc. So, because otherwise we're just aggravating the situation, aren't we? One would argue. Technology is not an answer.
And that's a bit like a skills problem, isn't it? So we're educating young people today for skills that are essentially irrelevant in 20 years' time, or use some of them, right? A little bit. So what you're saying is that, we're building cities now that are actually going to be, not fit for purpose in X years' time. Maybe not so many years from now, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
Just a question that occurs to me, I don't know how relevant it is or even how sensible the question is, but when you think of the concept of a smart city, how does that smart city then connect with the rest of the country? Because not everyone lives in cities. How does it connect with rural communities? Do we end up with a smart island where you've got all this technology and ease of access within a certain boundary, but once you're beyond that boundary, it all fails?
Yeah. So actually, really super point, and I'm actually mentoring a program, EU program that's called URBACT, which is about exactly that. Is that the whole smart concept should not be reserved for cities? What if you live in a village, right? So and you'll be building super hospitals and super this and super that, but so if you're living in a village and you have a heart attack, then this is going to be a damn sight further to your hospital than before. So actually, your health prognosis, your quality of life, and so on, is actually worsening by the building of smart cities. A bit like your vertical buildings, Gary, right? So we actually may be increasing inequality. So the debate is really, so how do we get away from the kind of smart cities into smart societies? That is much more for all, and not just about big cities. I think that's a really important point. So that part of what this URBACT program is looking at, which where Loop City, by the way, in Copenhagen is part of the URBACT program, it is actually, so what's the learning that we can take from smart cities and that might work in small environment? So it's about virtual, as Steve was saying, it's about virtual healthcare, virtual lots of things, yeah? So to cater for needs, people don't just live around the corner from the hospital. Yeah? So.
Do you know region villages? Stanford professor created a village of around 100 houses, 4 concentric circles. No, apparently not. But they create more food per square meter than a traditional farm field, and they are energy positive while connected to 4 or 5G internet. So that would actually enable you to have a smart society outside of cities in what would look like real communities as well. I personally like the project quite a lot. I'd like to live there with friends. But the only issue is, of course, the hospital part. But then again, it would actually enable what I think would be one of the more brighter versions of the future, where you have tech that supplements living in a community and having meaningful lives around people that you love.
Terminology, so there's smart city and there's smart society, maybe it's about smart communities, right? So I think this is something that we could definitely talk about, as well as part of this whole thing, without being politicians, yeah? Because that is exactly the human dimension, the needs of people and communities, and actually probably also capturing the inequality point a little bit, isn't it? So how do we get from smart cities, the kind of the reserve of Singapore and Copenhagen and London and Dubai and Barcelona, into communities? Yeah, how do we do that? Yeah.
I actually think often the big cities are offering a role model for the smaller cities. So personally I have a startup that works within smart waste. And we are doing running a project for a year now with Copenhagen, where we're having some really, really interesting data. But now, as we go to much smaller cities outside, actually the fact that Copenhagen has been progressive thinking and adopted a solution, now everybody's tagging along. So I think actually the big cities can actually act as a role model for the smaller communities to embrace the technology and then sort of having an interplay between them as we start to add smart mobility and all these other things.
But there's a question on that, and I think absolutely right. And part of, for example, the URBACT program that we have, so this is places like Basingstoke and you know, a town in Latvia and, you know, whatnot, are part of those sort of programs. I think that's exactly right. What can we learn from cities? But there's a resource question, isn't there, to your point, Stephen, about, you know, what's the model around this? So how does Little Stevenage fund this? Yeah, without having the purse of Greater Copenhagen or the GLA. So, you know, we can't hope to answer that question, but I think we can certainly start to think about the smart city versus smart society versus smart community question, you know? So let me just take a quick rain check, because it's just in terms of time, because I don't want to kill a debate that everybody is enjoying, just because it's kind of out of time. But so what's the appetite? Do you want to carry on for a little bit, or do you want to say, right, well, let's pick it up tomorrow? What's the appetite? What do you want to do? Now I killed the talking panel. Panel, what do you want to do? Because we just need to have a quick look at the questions behind us as well. We can do a poll that says close or keep going. What do you want? Yeah, exactly. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll close off this bit, but I think we've actually captured the point. So we'll feed them back, and everything that's on the Sli.do tool is also being captured, so we can feed them back into the forum as well. Just want to have a quick look at the questions behind us. Okay, it's everything we've got that's up there at the moment, isn't it? So you can sort of scroll down. We addressed a few of them earlier, I thought. So Leighton, the shift of population towards city, and then speakers see a time in the future the city becomes more important than country, no borders. That's an interesting point. That's quite a substantive question. Perspectives on that now, or something we keep for tomorrow as well? So, is it all about cities, just, you know, country borders, or what? Anything now, or?
That was my question.
That's your question, fantastic.
I'm not going to answer it.
Yeah, okay. Anyone wants to make a point about that? Or it's quite a big question in a way with Brexit as well, isn't it, really? So are we actually going to be, is Europe actually now, it's a massive question, isn't it? So are we now sort of becoming more individualist and sort of UK starting and it might be Brexit and Brexit and whatnot? So are we actually now putting up borders rather than opening up? You know, that's a massive question.
Sorry, it could be a challenge to nationalism. And maybe nationalism is something that's in its depth grows. As populations shift and change, and we get away from this concept of physical borders, accepting this to drop of war. You know, this got the potential really to bring people together. But I don't know how people will handle that loss of identity. Not the loss of identity, but people cling on to a national identity. I suppose the challenge is that as well.
It's a massive question, isn't it? That is super interesting, but it may be out of the scope of what we can hope to address in this smartest now. Does anybody want to comment? Yeah, awesome.
I bet that you have more values in common if you live in London, Paris, Copenhagen and Berlin than if you are living 100 kilometers away from your capital. And I find that to be quite interesting. If you look at the history of Europe, there has been decentralization, centralization and so on. And right now we've been used to the national state for so long that it's almost scary to think that we would decentralize and give city-states more, have city-states again. But it seems to be the natural way things are moving anyway. Every single political land map in the world almost has what used to be an American phenomenon with big cities, one political color, heartland, another color. And you see it everywhere now. So isn't it the natural evolution to have a greater autonomy between the regions?
Yeah.
Can I just say,
no, I'm going to answer your boss first, and then you.
This is just a really minor point, but at the Northern Powerhouse event last week, I don't want to compare and contrast, but they were looking at the divisions into what they were going to look at. And the one I thought was cleverest was they put transport and connectivity together as one phrase. And it's an interesting one because if you have connectivity, you don't necessarily need to travel, and vice versa. And so I think one of the clever things to do tomorrow is to put contradictions into our problem statements, like economics and growth, because you can have a more efficient economy, but it kills all the jobs. You know, there's a direct implication of one over the other, as opposed to having silos, which are, we're going to have better transport, we're going to have better this, we're going to have better that.
And of course in Luke City they're doing exactly the opposite, right? They're saying let's use the fact that we're building a transport infrastructure here as the backbone to building a connected city. Yeah. So you might say if everybody's connected, who needs that DLR structure that's being built, right? But actually that is the sequence, the logic. It's like let's connect the towns physically, and then we use that to kind of create the digital. And smart solutions on top of that. So, yeah, Gary.
Just a quick point about the divisions. Where is the main division going to be under smart cities or anywhere? It's going to be the digital divide. If you can organise, because you're digitally connected, you've seen it everywhere, as you read the headlines today, it's in Venezuela or wherever, the Arab Spring, then you can resist. If you don't have that digital connection, then you're still relying on old forms of communication and you will be destroyed, or you will be defeated, or you will be oppressed. That's how things are going to turn out into the future. And it's in the interest of governments to make sure that they maintain the monopoly on digital. And if you don't believe me, look what happened in India when Facebook tried to create free walled garden internet connection for the villages. The government turned it down because they said under the auspices that they couldn't reach any internet site, they only had certain connections. So the question you have to ask yourself is limited connection better than no connection? Because that's where the divide's going to be in the future.
I can see there are a lot of questions by the same person. I'm not sure, I don't know if Fred's here still or not. But let's just try and look at them real quick. So we can also group them and see if maybe it's better given the time that we pick them up in the discussions tomorrow. So one is about waste management, right? Impact of waste in cities, food, garbage. In your opinion, how would a smarter city deal with these issues? But that is definitely a waste management issue. Anybody want to talk about that now or tomorrow?
No, I'm just looking forward to the discussions tomorrow. I think that you're picking up on one of the earlier points. I think it would be wise for us if we put some kind of dilemmas into this discussion tomorrow, because what we're talking about now is very sort of multifaceted and talking about what can the rural areas learn from the technology development in urban areas. That's a critical question to ask ourselves. I think there are some basic facts here that we have to face. The urbanization trend is here to stay. I think it's absolutely not realistical to turn the back against that trend. So how can we cater for that development, knowing that urban areas are going to be even bigger in the future? That kind of dilemma will be viable interesting for us to put into the group discussions tomorrow. Maybe it would be possible to sort of rephrase some of the things going on tomorrow based on the discussion now. I think.
We'll have open sessions tomorrow deliberately.
Great.
We wanted to make sure that we capture all this.
Great.
Anything else? Anybody wants to know anything about waste management? We capture them anyway, so we'll put them on the list for tomorrow. But just if anybody wants to know anything now. Then it's about. Smart city concept, moving hierarchical business information systems into the street, is that a problem or solution? That's quite a big one. We kind of touched on it a little bit, haven't we? Anybody want to say anything about that? No? Let's keep it. Someone's only shouting. E-enabling traditional car-based infrastructure is problematic. We need digital infrastructure for networking, which is free art to transform livability. So that's, I think, it's definitely one of the things we're going to be picking up tomorrow, isn't it? So not sure if Fred will be here tomorrow, but it would be interesting to hear sort of context. Need to change the relationship between dwellers in cities and all political structures, find and allow participation by citizens. Yeah. So I think that's really the heart of what we're talking about, isn't it? So how do we actually get more community engagement? And we've been involved in a lot of that work around. It's actually quite hard to achieve. I think you're doing a good job of engaging the community with your crowdfunding, but it's actually really hard. Because what we're finding with community engagement in all the work that we've seen is again, it's the divide. It's the people who are technically literate and are interested in the sort of subjects of smart cities. You're not going to get disabled, the elderly, people who are not technologically literate or have access to broadband. They're not going to engage in these debates, right? So you are already getting people who are in the know and in the affordability informing the debate, whereas those other categories are actually left out. Right? That's what is happening with community engagement, and that may actually be counterproductive. So that's definitely a good point. Isn't there a contradiction between these sort of capabilities and the industrial mobility? How about make a culture at home instead, more bits, not atoms? That's what needs to be explaining. If cities are to become states, we will need to work out a citizen-centric constitution for citizens rather than corporatise politics and London doctrines. Okay, that's quite a specific point. But actually, I think the context here in London is some of what Sli.do is talking about, isn't it? Let's give more power to London for a number of reasons. One angle is Brexit. So London as a whole voted Remain. So but now that we're having to live with Brexit, yeah. And London is probably quite unique, major contributor to the UK economy. Why don't we get more power, more taxpayers, money, diverted to London to be able to do more things and so on. That's quite a big question as well. So I think given that it's fairly late, I've really enjoyed it. I hope you have too. I think it's a fantastic debate. We're opening up some key issues. We can't hope to solve the political issues, but I think part of what we can do tomorrow is to actually scope what is the scope and outscope of all of this, so we can actually be quite focused about what we can hope to achieve under the 8 themes versus not. So I think what we just want to end up doing, and it's not necessarily the final answer today, but can you just put up the sustainability themes again, so we can just have a look. So, is that all right? Yeah. So really what we want to do, yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, so that's just to round off. So just scroll forward one or two for me. Yeah, so these are sustainability themes, right? So sustainable construction, tech, transportability, engineering, digital infrastructure, culture, public health and experience. Now, I think, as I said this morning, they have come about for a reason, because people have said these are the areas. If we decide that one or two of those may be wrong, then we should change them, right? So we just saw the division before. I don't know if we have access to that. So, but if we should, rename them or replace one or whatever, I think this is what we should do. It's not us telling you these are the 8 themes as a starting point. These are the themes people have said we'd like to be part of the programme. But if people who are in and now driving the programme rather than us think they should be different, then I think we should collectively agree, are these the right themes or should we change one or two? Yeah. So we can discuss that a little bit tomorrow as well. But like I said, it's not just something that we have dreamt up. It's because people have said these are the 8 themes. But so those are the 8 themes for now until we decide otherwise. And then what I really want to do is, I don't know if can you still bring up the Sli.do sustainable, where you all act. So what I like, not this one actually, where people have the poll. Yes, exactly. See, there you go. Gosh, that's changed. So it feels like Eurovision Song Contest. So if you turn around now, you can see it's interesting. So we've still got naught in engineering, which is interesting. I mean, we may be asking the wrong question. Maybe we should rephrase it rather than calling it engineering, but we'll talk about that. We see culture now, right? And maybe that's come about because of some of the people discussions we've had. So what I'd really like to think about, if you can use the Sli.do tool, just kind of on your way out, if you like, and just really try and say, look, I'm interested in this. Because tomorrow we're going to be talking in the round tables, and we have to think of a mechanism for what if you're interested in more than one round table. You know, how do we do that? Maybe it's a circulation way of doing things. But that's more we can use to talk about tomorrow, so we can kind of get quite practical. So if you haven't voted, as it were, or allocated yourselves, please do. So we have some sort of idea. We can actually download behind the tool. We can actually see who's opted into which table, so that tomorrow we know exactly who's assigned themselves to which table. So please just go and do that. I don't think we can force it any further today, but please do think about it. Yeah. So I think that is probably
Jeanette,
the end of today. Yes.
can I just allow me just to say that I think I speak for most of the people up here. It's not every day you find yourself in a panel where there are more panelists than people in the audience. But actually, I think that thanks to some very, very great questions and enthusiastic people in the crowd and the questions up here, I think actually this discussion turned into quite a very interesting discussion. I do hope that some of the key points that are transcending the various topics that we've touched upon are going to be discussed in the roundtables tomorrow, rather than just talking about sustainability and isolated from that engineering and isolated from that experience, because I don't think that makes sense. I think there's going to be a red thread in the roundtables tomorrow based on some of the issues that came up in this. So thanks to especially you and you for having a great discussion here.
And I think, you know, it's our forum, and I think if we decide to do it in a slightly different way, then we should, right? Because we need to just do it in the most productive way. And by the way, the whole thing today has been recorded, and there are a lot of people who couldn't actually be here today who are following it and want to be able to watch it. So the whole thing is available, and we're going to be sharing it so people can also feed in and stuff. So we'll talk much more about that tomorrow. But some people gone off on Easter breaks and whatnot, who wanted to be here, so but want to be part of it still. So thank you for that comment. So I think with that we should probably close for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I have, and I think it's fantastic to hear all the perspectives we've heard. And then we'll reconvene tomorrow at. Was it the same time? Yes. So same 8:30 to 9. And then we've got Paul Finch to do the opening, and we've just got the some quick themes, and then we basically got welcome groups, round tables, the rest of them. And then we can discuss how we best capture everything. But we're going to be logging them all and showing you all the questions and the debate we've had, and then we can decide on the best ways to take forward. Yeah? So I think with that, we are probably at the end of the day our far over.
So I just
This is quite the